So this is a talk that we actually do every year because the National Urban League releases these statistics every year. But it's funny, I was just talking to Doug and I was like looking through my email at like drafts that I submitted in previous years, and always at the top, like I write the little joke, "State of Black America, it's messed up." But, but it's true, and that's what these statistics consistently reflect. So as I was saying, every year the National Urban League releases an important report on the state of Black America. The report highlights the inequality and institutionalized racism in the United States by documenting the considerable disparities in the rates of poverty, unemployment, incarceration, and education access that plagues Black America. This year's statistics are no different. They show the same general pattern. African Americans currently have half the access to health insurance as white Americans. The Urban League's Equity Index places African Americans' living standards in general at 71.8% of whites, declining from 72.1% in 2010. In urban centers, the rates of unemployment for African American men are as high as 50%. African American unemployment is 15% compared to 8% for whites as the official unemployment rate. The median income of white households in the United States equals $54,680. For African American households, that median income is $33,500. While every 3 out of every 4 white families own their homes, less than half of Black and Hispanic families do. African Americans are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts. And we all know that about that study, according to a study by the Malcolm X grassroots movement, in 2012, on average, 1 African American was killed every 36 hours by law enforcement or security guards. Record numbers of people in the United States are experiencing real poverty right now. According to the National Center for Children in Poverty, 22% of the children living in the United States live in families whose earnings are below the federal poverty line. This group, the NCCP, calculates its own real cost of living for a family and asserts that a whopping 45% of children in the United States are either poor or near poor by those standards, by the real standards of what it takes to live and raise a family. 70% of African American children under the age of 6 are poor or near poor, compared to 35% of whites, and 67% of Latinos, and 70% of Native children. So this year is very similar to other years, and the Urban League gave us all this data, but this year they came to a curious conclusion. When they're introducing the document on their website, they state that, quote, "Yet more than the economy, more than jobs, more than an excellent education for all children, the single issue that arguably stands to have the greatest impact on the future of Black America in 2012 is the vote." I mean, applied to a different historical context, that point could be valid. The Black struggle for civil and voting rights remains one of the most profound and widely felt social movements in the history of this country. All over the South and nationwide, Black people organized, fought, they fought back, they tore down Jim Crow, inspiring many other important movements to take shape, and producing great legal and social gains for African Americans. It's important to note, however, that those gains were not evenly distributed across class lines. In fact, capitalism has proven to be flexible enough to incorporate a small section of Black people into the upper echelons of the economy and government, while relegating the vast majority of us to poverty, wages, and continued discrimination. So how can the Urban League assert that measures to resolve the profound, systematic, and persistent inequalities will somehow have less impact than voting? Obviously, their implication is that voting will bring solutions to these problems, but is that the case? In 2008, for example, the voter turnout by African Americans, particularly young African Americans, was historic. Millions more African Americans voted compared to previous elections. The reason was clear. Many saw the prospect of the first Black president as a symbolic culmination of the centuries-long struggle against racism in the United States. Yet, after the election of Obama, which coincided with the Great Recession, the country's persistent inequality and rising poverty only got worse. There was no big response from Obama and other Democrats who counted on the votes of millions of African Americans to achieve office. There was never, I don't know if you guys saw it or got to vote on it, but I didn't. There was never any ending mass incarceration and police murder bill, or bring all children out of poverty bill, or a jobs for everyone bill, So in this day and age, what does the vote really deliver? African Americans, like other working class and oppressed people in the United States, do not get the opportunity to vote on the decisions that most impact their lives. Under capitalism, we can vote every 4 years for which representative of the ruling class will guide the existing system and thus maintain the status quo for the next 4 years. There's no opportunity to vote against unemployment or against police brutality. Instead, we're told to vote for the candidates that the ruling class puts in front of us, and the only ones that have a chance of winning have received hundreds of billions of dollars in corporate donations. These are the rules of the game, regardless of the identity of the candidate. So the National Urban League is correct to highlight the continuing struggle that we face as a people, but they are incorrect in asserting that voting is the key. You know, the major gains of the Black freedom movement, the end of slavery, the dismantling of Jim Crow apartheid, and the elimination of white supremacy as the official state policy and ideology were achieved through struggles. It was struggles that rocked all of society and amounted to revolutionary transformations. That is what is needed today. But the next chapter of the Black Revolution will be of a new character. It will be to turn the vision of the last civil rights revolution, equality, into a reality. It, like all revolutions, will seek the resolution of society's gravest and most outrageous contradictions: poverty, hunger, and homelessness in a world of plenty, children sent to prisons instead of schools, the expansion of inequality side by side with the celebration of symbolic equality. To achieve real equality, not only in the realm of law, but also in all aspects of life, would it require a social revolution that liberates the wealth of society and uses it to meet people's needs. That cannot happen short of a social revolution, overcoming once and for all the profit over people system of capitalism and dismantling the state that protects that system. This is the program of the PSL. The election of a Black president completes a cycle of reform that began in the civil rights movement, but now the system has no more political offices of any consequence to offer us. The era of symbolic victories and Black firsts, important as they may have been, has exhausted its energy, without resolving the fundamental contradictions of racial inequality and national oppression. You know, even when running our own candidates, the PSL asserted that it is the mass movement that has historically made the difference in this country, and it's through revolution that we will achieve socialism, equality, and liberation. With this message, you know, we join with all the day-to-day struggles and movements that put working class and oppressed people into motion against this racist system, and that is the only way this racist system will be overcome.